Morning. Come on in. Good, good, good. Oh, you want to use this? Click it down, and it will go forward. And if you want to go back, just go up. Yeah. Still 8:59. Keep talking, like 20 seconds. I'm assuming. We're assuming that's accurate. That's a big assumption to make. It's a clock in the university. Every one of them is like slightly different, right? Anyway, well, 9 a.m. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. And sorry for the Monday. It was a weird, like 18 to 24 hours of like flu symptoms. And me and my wife got sick almost at the same time. Like she was developing like same symptom like 30 minutes after me. It was whole weird, but I am much better. Like Monday night, I was already good actually. So by now I'm 100%. So sorry about that. Apologize. So the game plan is, like I said in a message, we're gonna pick it up today from where we left off in person, and the Friday class too. So you don't have to watch anything between now because I'm assuming you're more busy this, Saturday, Thursday, or whatever. And then right after Friday, by 1 p.m., I try to put the video lecture up so that you can watch on your time whenever you can. And I'll make sure that's not going to be 15 minutes long, okay? Hopefully like 35 minutes long or so that, you can chill a little bit. Sounds good? Sorry about that. Okay, there you go. And we have Siri today to talk about student group that I have been working with. So some of you have heard about it. Some of you haven't. For those of you who haven't taken RLS 100 last fall, so Siri.
I'm Siri, and I work with a couple of other art students on the executive review. So we, these are opportunities on campus and throughout the city. And yeah, we wanted to present to this conference because we already expect because I didn't do that. But the skills that we learned in this class, we use to select that research speaking and to education. I have a question. I just said so turning to education, developing new skills. So when you do these like learning skills, generating your self-awareness, so you can like you're like identifying things. And you can also gain knowledge through those research about not only yourself but also people around you and the world. And yeah, so that education part of our club, we want to teach people what the meaning of leisure is, not only just in our faculty but our faculty. Because leisure does add a lot to your life, as we all know, because we are all yeah, you wanted to follow us on Instagram? There's an Instagram bio. We repost a bunch of things. So we reposted stuff from social science as well as anything on campus. And we also have a Discord. So if you want to join a Discord, we also forget. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Shin also works with the folks, but I'm in the class. So yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, Siri started to help us work with us this time. So no, you go ahead. The reason why we started, I proposed this idea and a student took it up was, what's called experiential learning, doing stuff by doing, you get the knowledge in the classroom, you want to use it, right? And I was thinking about it, and there's a limitation to do that kind of stuff in one semester, I feel like, to be honest, in the classroom. But this really helps you to do programming, designing activity events, actually marketing it, executing it, evaluating it, getting money for it, well, at least trying to get money for it. All those grant writing skills and communication skills, social media skill. So if you want to develop those skills, please let us know, and we'll have fun. And Instagram, follow us. There's a good information about mental health and leisure on campus and whatnot just there too. So follow us. Okay. So we're gonna pick it up. We're gonna quickly finish chapter 1 first. All the buttons that I have to click before get to this ready page. Anyway, so we were talking about first chapter about introduction to the social psychology of leisure. And in the last part of it is defining that SPL, social psychology of leisure. And this is the definition that chapter provided. So if you haven't read the chapter 1, that's okay. It's not part of your critical reflection. Hey, Adam, good morning. Better actually. I was gonna say not too bad, but I'm peachy. There you go, that's the definition. For you. If you haven't read the chapter, that's fine. It's scientific, like we talked about. We try to be systematic, right? We study thoughts, feelings, and behavior. So we look at the both observables and unobservable. And the focus is obviously leisure. That's there. Now, the last part, real or imagined presence of others. That's important. Well, that goes to the social components, but the real or imagined, that's important. And that's the psychological focus too. That what's the best idea example? You go to gym. The way, let's say, the clothes you're gonna pick up, or the way you try to look, the way you try to behave, the way you try to exercise. Maybe the behavior, leisure behavior, maybe, is influenced by how you, for example, you think you're viewed by other people, whether it's good or not, right? And it happens. It happens to me, right? And it doesn't really matter if that your perception of other people's whatever, your viewer view, judgment of you, whatever, is actually real, that actually other people are thinking that way or not. It doesn't really matter. Have you ever been in a situation where you're like you're doing your own stuff, you're minding your own business, and they're like group of people who are kind of like looking, you feel like you're being looked at, and they're laughing, and like you're all of a sudden very self-conscious, and you started to realize your feelings and thoughts and behaviors kind of influenced by it, whether you like it or not. So that imagined part is that imagined influence from environment or social environment included has real power on how we feel what we do. And you can see, by the way, interaction is focused on this part, that we focus on both observable and unobservable. We look at both personal factors as well as the environmental factor. Okay. Now, speaking of the interactionist approach, it's been a while. The personal, environmental, we look at the both to understand human behavior, human psychology. Now, that's not to say that every single study in their social psychology of leisure does this well. It doesn't. Why? Because it's difficult. Because it's basically taking a bit of both, and it's always difficult to do that, right? In your life, right? It's always easier to just go one way or the other. So one individual studies may do it, but as a whole, as a literature, collectively, we strive to make that balance. Now, this model is developed by Gordon Walker, one of the authors of your textbook. And he had this big theoretical model predicting participation in actual participation in leisure recreation. And there's actually different variables, and you may have to zoom in a little bit. But some of them are personal, like preference, motivation, personality needs, so on and so forth, which we're going to talk about in the following chapters. But also there are some behavioral environmental factors like diversity, those socio-demographic factors. What is called setting affordance, like how the environment, whether it's the physical environment or the social environment, allow you to do certain things or not. So as a field, we try to be the interactionist. A few characteristics of SPL. One of them is that we focus on individual. And that's disciplinary characteristic. discipline's characteristics. Other discipline, like for example, sociology, they're good at looking at the groups of people, social institutions like marriage, education, those things, right? Anthropology is good at looking at the culture over time. Social psychology, we're good at looking at the individual. So that's where we are. You're taking a sociology course, that this is why. You got the source course in a sociology, right? You got this perspective from this course, so on and so forth, so that you have different perspective. Yeah, this is fine. Actually, you can read the chapter about it, but that's fine. Same thing. Now we study leisure experience, and then that's the definition of the experience. And by that, we mean this experience is a little different. This is not subjective experience. This is the broader term, anything really related to what people do during their leisure, basically, because we're trying to take the interactionist perspective, which is both observable behavioral aspect as well as unobservable experiential aspect of leisure as well. And then finally, this is very important. This is very important. The author said this at the very end of the chapter, which I feel like they should have said at the very beginning. Social science can never be completely value-free. I don't know natural science ever can be either, but social science definitely is not value-free. Like you may think, well, you may not even think, those questionnaires, we can change your responses into number. We can do fancy statistics, but that still means that how we chose those questions, how we frame them, how we interpret them, all those things, there are so many human subjective factors that go into it, right? And we bring our biases, we bring our cultural assumptions and whatnot. Now, this is why this relates to the assignment that's going to happen in a week or so, okay? Critical chapter reflection. Remember, you read one of the two chapters at least. If you can read the both chapters, that's great. But at least that will help you to actually incentivize you to read at least one of the two chapters. And not just get, just don't be the person like, yeah, 100%, everything here sounds good. No. But I want you to think about, okay, what are the assumptions that are made here? Does this apply every single context? What about this? What about the things that we learn from different courses that they seems to kind of contradict? How they can be reconciled, so on and so forth. That's what I want you to do in this assignment. Make sense? Because I think that makes you a critical, informed, smart users of information, the science, social science of leisure. Sounds good? I'm going to talk about that in our beginning of the next slide, the next chapter, and I'll take your question after that. Sounds good? Because that's about assignment, right? Okay, go ahead.
So those are basically like all like your personal like almost beliefs and stuff.
Some of them are personal beliefs. Some of them are personal beliefs. For example, one of the textbook authors, Douglas Cleaver, he's a nice dude. He looks like a bear with a white hair, gray hair. He's a really nice dude. However, he doesn't like, and this happens to actually many leisure scholars. They don't like anything online. They just don't. They don't get it either. And me started talking about online game. He doesn't like it. What happens that kind of person writes a chapter about technology? I'm not saying he's, so that's a personal experience, it's personal biases. Sometimes it's a cultural or social background, right? Sometimes male scholars talking about gender issues and like, okay, let's talk, let's see. It's not that those voices are not valid at all. But why are we not, okay, do we have actually female scholars who can talk about it? That can be actually, more the examples and writings and arguments can be more actually, representative and actually more powerful too. Why are we not doing that? And in a scientific inquiry too. Like I can do an experiment here, assuming that everybody behave like a Japanese. Guess what? They don't. They don't just, try to make a distance and bow each other. Don't hug me, please. No, we're not the same sometimes. On some level we're similar, but some level we're different. So we, those biases, whether it's the personals or cultural, they come in, creep in. The tricky part is that those assumptions and biases, we don't know what we don't know, in a way. When we're kind of, everybody has a blind spot, and we don't know that we're actually assuming certain things, something, sometimes. We don't know that we're making assumptions. That's a tough part. So as a users of information, I want you to be able to be critical about it, what you're reading, okay? Now, the chapter 3. So we skipped the chapter 2. If you want to read that thing, actually, the textbook was free, hopefully for you. So you didn't pay for it, but still. You can read that chapter 2 was about history. And there's actually interesting study that was conducted like 50 years ago, like cycling study. There's a social loafing study, all that kind of, socialist kind of studies and all that kind of interesting stuff. But I thought that I would just skip forward to the contemporary part, that this is a contemporary part of how we do actually, the question of how we do social psychology of leisure. But before that, that's the assignment. January 25th, midnight-ish is the deadline for the critical chapter, reflection 1. So you're going to choose either chapter 3 or 4, write your reflection about it. 3 sections. Do you remember 3 sections? What do you do in the first section, second section, third section? Do you remember? You want to take a guess? I'll bring you chocolate next time. Candy next time. Yes.
The first section, going through some like definitions of key terms and identifying key terms.
Yes.
Defining, explaining.
Yes. First section is pretty easy. You identify keywords, key concepts in a chapter, and define them. Put the page number. Why page number especially? Because that way you can actually go back to it before exam. There you go, right? That everything hopefully will set you up for the exam. Second section, anybody remember? Yeah.
Apply one concept to
Apply a concept that from the chapter to your personal leisure life and or leisure service industry, like professional issues that you observe. Thank you, Deanne. You have that binder, The third section. Isaiah.
Raise critical question.
Yes, raise critical question, 1 or 2. Okay, and that's where, thank you. That's where this is coming from, the last point. The critical questions are the parts which you thought you understood well. It's not the kind of question like, Shin, I didn't get this concept, so can you explain me more? I would do that anytime except this place. Make sense? You can send me email. You can come talk to me before or after class. We can always talk about that. But this is not this is the place where you kind of advance the thoughts rather than, I didn't get this part, so I want to make sure I understood it. Okay, that's not the purpose. Get it? The third section. There's a guideline, there's a rubric, there's a sample. Take a look at it. If you have questions, send me email. Okay. Any questions so far about this? You know what? Actually, Curtis, before that, I'll take your questions, but talk to each other 30 seconds, because sometimes you're like, am I the only one who have a question about this? No. You actually have a question. So talk to each other and just make sure that everybody has a question. What's your question about this assignment? 30 seconds. You guys are good. You two are good. Jasmine and Chrissy, we got it. What about you, Marvin? Any questions? Anything simplest. You better ask now than after the deadline, right?
We've been in school for too long. We've written a couple critical reports.
You kind of got it in your bone. Is that what it is? Like you have
Like 2.5 degrees, but we're still here.
you have a 2.5 degrees?
She's been in school that long.
Okay. Don't worry. I've been to school for a long time too, myself.
You have 3 degrees, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Including PhDs.
Yeah. We didn't have that master PhD joint stuff, so. How about you? You're all good? Ready to go? Okay. So everybody had a question, right? Okay, what's your question? Curtis, you had a question?
Yeah, my question, I just looked, and I asked my question, but I have a question
That's good.
on my question. Why do we have to commit new words? Why can't we do it in like
What is that? Sorry,
Like,
the other one.
box.
Oh, Google Docs?
Yeah.
Oh, you can do the Google Docs, but could you submit it through the doc? You can download it, right?
Yeah, or we can submit it. I just find
Okay,
like-
so, okay, PDF, here's what it is.
Okay.
I will give you feedback. So that you can build, you can improve upon.
Yeah.
And that is much easier in a Word rather than a PDF.
Okay.
And for you too, to look at it, and although yellow bubble that you actually have to click in to actually see it, or to edit, like I have to type much more.
Okay.
That makes sense?
I just found.
There's a free version of the Office, by the way.
I know, I downloaded it from my like Chromebook, but it's just so.
Chromebook.
sucks.
Anybody Chromebook user? All right, we'll figure out. Okay.
I can do it. It
Okay.
just sucks.
Yeah. Well, we'll figure out. Okay. You have a question.
No,
Let me know.
it's for-
No, that's good. That's fine. Oh, okay, cool. That's cool. Anybody else? They're good to go, ready to rock and roll. All righty. That's good. This first, well, not first time. Anyway, so we're going to talk about three different things. Keep talking about social psychological way of studying and a few patterns of definitions of leisure and patterns of definition. That's what we're going to talk about. Okay. And then we're going to go through different studies with their special focus on research methods and definition, how leisure is defined in each study. So it's going to be a little sciencey, but before doing that, this is a question. Why do we care? Why do you care? No, generally, not just in this course though. Forget about this for a second. Why do you have research method course in every single degree, whether it's in your education, right? Or Kines, or burst, or engineering, probably, I'm assuming. You'll have a research method, statistics, why not two? Why do you care about that? Why? Making sure that what you're learning is accurate. Okay. Does that make sure that though, like you learning that research course method, whatever, method course, does that make sure that everything else you're learning is accurate or?
What you're looking at stuff, like how to properly filter through it.
So you have the ability to assess, right, the quality of information. Good.
Could you argue that it's also building on that, it's like to be like ethical when you do your research?
So when the students become the researcher, that's what you're saying.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't
That
know.
can be
I know
actually,
what
there
you
are
mean by
many
research method.
undergraduate research opportunities at the U of A. There are actually, those things will help you, should help you, right? Rather than like, I have zero idea what to do versus like, yeah, I got some ideas. I heard some stuff, right? That's much better, much important. And also you, not just how to, but also you can be ethical. You can be informed in that process too. You're not going to just go ahead and poke people with a needle, right? No, you need a consent for that. Definitely a big time consent. But a few reasons here in this course specifically. You will, I'm assuming many of you will become some professional. My fingers are crossed. We're going to work toward that, okay, together. When you become professional, whatever you want to, just open up a website, professional website of your association. They have a code of ethics. And in that, typically, if it's a good profession, they actually have some clause about you have to do evidence-based approach, evidence-based practice. So you can't just go ahead and just like, I love football. I love basketball. So I'm going to just do basketball stuff with my kids at the summer camp. You have a liability for the clients, your kids and their parents, especially the parents. They're scary as heck. Anyway, right? So we have that professional obligation. I don't want to scare you off, but when you get a job, especially a professional job, you have that professional obligations. Okay, that's a big difference from being students. Now, where that evidence-based, the evidence come from, that's where the research coming into, right? And evidence is based on a data, information, And that data are based on collected through the methods. So the methods, it's the process. Method is the process. So there are good and bad data. You know that. You lived through COVID time. You know there are good and bad data, right? Some of them are good, some of them are bad. Why? Part of it is because there are some not good, some of them good, bad research methods. If you don't know that, you literally have to believe 100% what the people like me saying, researchers. We just write, pretend to be smart, and all write all those big words, and you go like, okay, that sounds about right, so I'm gonna do that. Do you feel like you can trust me? Oh, maybe. Well, thank you, I appreciate it, but you know, not everybody is like me, maybe. Another reason is that actually not that you're gonna be the consumer of information based off that research and evidence and data, but also you're actually gonna be that user potentially, like Isaiah was saying, but not as a student, well, which you could, but also as a future professionals too, because sometimes you do something like let's say you do camp, right? Summer camp with the kids. You don't want to just do it. You just do it and hey, everybody was happy. We got some nice Instagram pictures, so we're good. No, you got to evaluate. You got to actually show to your clients and next generation, future clients that, hey, these are the benefits that actually kids are getting from my program, right? Before getting into like talking to the government next time to get more $1 million grant to keep your program going, you have to have that evidence and data. How do we do that? We do evaluation. For that, typically we use the research method. Yes, I'm a little too short. I need a little one of those sticky things. Anyway, so research methods are like a tools in your toolbox. And it's coming from the guy who doesn't have a toolbox. So don't quote me on that. But typically, toolkit has a different tools, right? If you only know one thing, like for example, survey, survey, you got the Google Doc, the Google form down, ready to go. Good for you. But if you only can do one form of evaluation, that's like a person, just like me, actually, someone who can only use a screwdriver. And if the problem is like, the screw, and actually you have to screw in, screw out, that's good. But if the situation you're facing is actually a nail sticking out from the wall, it's a metaphor, it's a, simile, it's analogy. And you're trying to hit that thing with their screwdriver, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? You'll make a miss? What? You miss. You may hit your finger. You may end up in a emergency room. I was gonna say actually your wife will yell at you, but you want solve the problem. You can't get the nail down straight, right? Just like that. For you to know different research methods across different courses is very important. That way you have that repertoire of like you get the survey, you get the interview, you get this, you get observation, you get this, you get that, so that you may not be experts, fluent in everything, because I don't expect you to be with their undergraduate time only. But at least somebody's doing survey where you like, why? You can just talk to the people, interview them. That sounds better idea. You have that idea because the entire toolbox. Make sense? Okay, this is very important. And in this course specifically, compared to some of the RLS 210 scholarship course, 210, or some of the Kin course, you may actually see unique ones that are more related to social psychology of leisure. So that uniqueness is there. That's a little bit. This is a little bit of side note, so you don't have to worry about it. So if I ask this in the exam question, now you can answer, right? Natalia, good timing to come back. No, I'm just saying, if I ask you this now in an exam, you can answer me. You can give me some reasons, right? If I ask this in exam, yeah, Kristen is like, yep, we're good. Okay, cool. So there you go. So for those of you who Took me like 2 years ago. I tried to be as clear as possible what's gonna appear in exam, right? That doesn't mean that exam is gonna be easy, but try not to like throw your curveball. Anyway, so actually, in terms of contents of the chapter, at the very beginning, actually, author talked about something very important in terms of research. Kind of skipped through it. It's called something called constructionist and a post-positivist perspective, blah, 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 blah. And some of you, if you actually read the chapter and pay attention, you may go like, what are those? They never define. So I'm going to quickly define what they are. And they're called what's called a research paradigm. How many of you heard the word paradigm? Well, actually, well, the word paradigm in a research method context. In a research method context. Okay, some of you. Good, thank you. There are basically foundations and assumptions that we make as researchers. And that's why important. It's at the bottom, and every other decisions are kind of influenced and driven by it. Even like what kind of data we're collecting. We sometimes talk about quantitative and qualitative data, number or not number. Those big difference based on this, paradigms. The first major paradigm, we're going to talk about two big things. And the first is called what's called post-positivist. Now, that does not mean that these people came after some happy people. No, if you actually look at the Wikipedia, there's actually interesting history about why they are called positivists, but okay. And these are the series of assumptions that these group of researchers make, and then their research is based upon. So now if you some study and it fits this category, and then okay, those are the assumptions those research, studies and researchers made. The first one, does that make sense? Nature of reality is single, independent of observers. Does that even make sense? Kinda, like fuzzy, but I think this makes more sense when you see actually the other side, when you compare. So let me just hold on to that for now, okay? Goal of research here is to generate knowledge that approximate to the reality. So get close, as close as possible to the reality. Why as close? Why don't you get it right, like 100%? Because these are the people who also recognize that human knowledge cannot be quote unquote perfect. There's typically always some gap between what we know versus what's happening out there. We accept that. Make sense? Knowledge is fallible. It's not always getting better, although we assume this, we hope this. No, actually, no. We sometimes make wrong, spend billions of dollars into the wrong decision, and we find nothing sometimes, and that happens, and that's fine. We use the process called a falsification. Did you know for the most part of the science, we cannot actually, let's say, oh, sorry, I got to write down over there. But A causes B. A, let's say exercise. B is, let's say, mental health, right? Exercise causes mental health, right? Simple. This is a hypothesis that you have. You want to test it. You want to validate it. Actually, in science, you cannot verify this. That's called a verification process. And that's the opposite to falsification. Actually, you cannot actually do this. What can you do is that basically A does not cause B. You actually make this opposite hypothesis and actually create a situation, research, experiments or surveys or whatever. And you put this hypothesis into that through those data, through those experiments or surveys or whatever, and you test this and then you refute it, reject it, so that you actually have more confidence to the alternative of A causes B, actually. And that's called, in its simplest, that's what the falsification is. Logically speaking, we cannot directly actually verify A causes B, because that's only technically possible by a mathematician or a theoretical physicist. A causes B. Because in a real world, there's so many errors, so many actually noises. We have some things may not happen just because of the fact that we don't know. Anyway, but that's falsification, sorry. And these are the people, this is a bit important. These are the people who tend to use statistics. For those of you who love numbers, people who love numbers, data, spreadsheet, those of you who make a spreadsheet for everybody, only serious. My wife is, she's got a spreadsheet for everything. Yes.
And then that's how you get that. How do you know that, like, whoever's passing, how do you know they're putting like a good effort into proving that?
Are you saying that your real, now the opposite case, your real hypothesis is this? Is that what you're saying? No. Could you say it again? Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
How do you know the set of funds you're putting in? How do you know whether it's researcher? How do you know they're putting in like a valuable effort to prove that?
Help. Although you're actually working on a B. I mean, this bottom one. How do you know that like they're actually, well, actually, no, there's A causes B is actually one teeny possibility among the universe of different options. That's why actually just logically, there's no way to create anything to actually directly prove this. That's the point. But this is actually a very big area that A is not affecting and causing anything to do with B. That's actually, sorry, A causes B. A causes B can be in many actually ways, but A does not cause B. That's a very specific one possibility that we can actually quantify. And we know, even with some errors and some noises in a real world, we know that with some confidence, yes, whether this is happening or this is not happening, we can tell this statistically and all that. There's actually no methods to actually go about directly verifying and quote unquote proving this. Verification and proof, that's what actually this is, Krista. This is actually science of philosophy of science too. We can talk about this hours, which we're gonna do after this class. But for this course though, it's just that actually it's simply not possible for modern scientists right now today for us to devise our experiments, studies, data collection, whatnot, to actually go about it directly. You don't know it, but actually, sometimes in actual study, you see something called null hypothesis or H hypothesis 0. This is what this is about. But that's a stat, so don't worry about it. These are the people who use the numbers, though. That's very important. Quantitative. And I'm making some distinction, a little bit of exaggerated distinction to an extent. But anyway, that's fine. It's a starting point. The other group is called a constructivist and not a constructionist. I've never heard that. They're also called interpretivist sometimes. These are the people now, this is, hopefully this starts to make sense. They think nature of reality, not just a physical reality, but the social reality, especially because we're talking about social science, are multiple on people's view. That's important. Because think about it, social scientists or social science, at the end of the day, is interaction, communication. Like I try to learn about you. I try to learn about you, right? It's interaction. So human being trying to learn about another human being or group of human beings. So what's important is not actually quote unquote objectively what that person is doing or feeling, quote unquote, whether we can actually know the feeling. Let's say neurologically, yeah, we can know the, brain activations and, all that kind of good stuff. But what that means is important, social, for social scientists, how people make sense of it. Yes, there's some spike is happening and stuff like that. And people make sense of that as, let's say, guilt. And people have a whole thing about the guilt. That's what is interesting. So, and in the one person's guilt, although you may see actually brainwave pretty similarly, but maybe different from another person's guilt, how they experience it, how they put attached meaning to it, right? So for these people, these researchers, that layer, the layer of the reality that they're interested in, that's multiple, because from one person to another person, what, let's say, basketball means. You're the British, you're from UK, and you're that quote unquote, sorry, weirdo who loves basketball versus a lot of people in the UK is like, no, that's not the sports, the football, right? What the basketball means can be very different. We're interested in that. So the basketball as a reality is not singular. It means quite a different things across culture, from culture to culture, person to person, multiple. Now, the other group assumes the other. There's something that we can, quite objectively say that there's something, one reality about something. We're about their guilt, about certain kind of leisure behavior, about certain kind of leisure experience like flow. It's one, hopefully. And we try to approximate to that. These people know the target itself is multiple. Therefore, what we're trying to do, try to get the in-depth knowledge, how people live, how people make sense. Construe means make sense, attach meanings. Knowledge, research by nature is subjective for those people. And those are the people who tend to do something like collect the qualitative data by talking people, observing people. What's a good one? Doing focus group, which is also talking. Pictures, drawings, performance, arts, all goes in there. Make sense? That's a heavy stuff, by the way. That's very heavy stuff. Because I teach the same thing about their PhD students sometimes too, but just so you know. Now, Shin, that's a good stuff. I mean, that's a theoretical stuff, but how does it look like? The paradigms in action. So let's use this topic, leisure and well-being among single parents. You're interested, you're the researchers, you're interested in how leisure and well-being are related to each other among single parents. Are they at all? Maybe not. Look at some single parents. They're so busy. More leisure may not be actually good for them, right? Seriously. So if you're a positivist, the first group, you may conduct maybe a large-scale survey with the thousands of single parents. Yes, there are a lot of single parents out there. And to measure single parents' leisure, let's say maybe free time, right? Number of free time, quite objective, quantifiable. Leisure activity, types of leisure activity engaged. Maybe well-being, there's a standardized scale of happiness and satisfaction, life satisfaction, one not. And you see the relationship between them with the statistics. And if leisure is related to well-being, you may devise some sort of like intervention to modify people's leisure life so that they can be happier. They can, their well-being goes up. This is just one example. I'm not saying that this is the way for them, but it's one example. Versus if you're coming from the other camp of the researchers, same topic. You might ask questions like fundamental questions, like, for example, what do they actually even mean by this, leisure and well-being? Seriously, we don't know that. We know what leisure typically means among different people, but not single parents. Because once again, is leisure even a good thing for the single parents who have like millions of stuff to do, and people trying to say like, hey, you gotta check off these, leisure activities as well for your kids and whatnot. It's a lot of pressure. Maybe that's actually not a good thing for this population. You may do an in-depth interview to ask about it. They try to seek even maybe further more contextualized knowledge because maybe single mother versus single fathers have different ideas, right? So you want to get that. Single parents of color may have different ideas as well. So you want to get that too. The context is very important for them. The nuanced knowledge, because knowledge is always subjective for them. Quite different. Make sense? So you see different kind of research in this course and different courses actually as well. So you know where, hopefully now you know, why are they doing like totally different things? They come from quite a different perspective, and everything is based on the paradigm. Funny, right? Some of the can you now? Okay. Now you spend some time in the faculty and degree, so now you know some professors, right? Professor. I'm talking about the professors, more like a professors, not instructor people who only teach courses, because they don't do research. But the people who like us who do research, now you can see like based on the teaching styles and the way they talk, you must be this side. You must be this side. You might be able to actually tell, which would be a fun game maybe to do. You might be positivist. I don't know what that means. Anyway, some of the basic research keywords. This is the last part that I want to talk about today. The chapter talked about. These are very important because I'm going to use this terminology. And I don't want you to feel like, oh, what does that mean? Empirical is one of the first. Empirical is simple, using data. But data does not necessarily mean numbers. Data can be quantitative or qualitative, like people's words. That's also data. Data is a fancy way to say basically information. Hopefully, accurately, systematically collected information. That's what it is. So empirical studies means a study that are based on the data rather than people go like, and thought about it and just wrote something up, right? That's also, there's a value to it too. People think, that there's interesting ideas. Faculty of Arts, those people, really good with that. But empirical means based on the data. Variable. It's an aspect of research phenomena that vary across cases. For example, if I have a 200 students, sample of 200 U of A students, their free time in hours, like how many hours per day or week, that will change, that will vary, right? That would be different across people. That's variable. Now, give me what's not variable. You have a sample of U of A students. What is not variable among them? Because if you know that, you know what the variable is. Being a U of A student, good one. That's a constant because by definition, they're all U of A students, right? So they're all U of A, 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 U of A. So it's always U of A. That's constant. That's not variable. Another one that chapter talked about, hopefully you read the chapter, hypothetical construct. That's a little bit of a tricky one. What it is that unobservable variable that researchers assume to exist and explain certain behavior, like a flow. You guys know flow by now, hopefully, getting into the zone, right? But you don't actually see them. I know you think like you see, especially if you ever played sports, you feel like, oh, that guy's in the zone right now. Like you feel like you see them, but you actually don't. It's not like when the athletes get into that zone, whatever, right? There's a light bulb goes up and you're like, yeah, that person is zoned. Don't get near him, It's not like that, right? We assume based on observable markers, like how well that person is performing, how focused they look like, we assume that person is in a special state, but never flow is observable. You can't directly see them. More simpler example, happiness. We talk about that so much in daily conversation too, but we never see happiness. Do we? Tell me. For those of you who think who saw happiness, tell me, when did you see happiness? I want to hear that actually. That makes me happier. And you all go like, I've never seen happiness. That makes me very unhappy. But have you seen happiness?
People with puppies.
People with the puppies, I know. Well, why? People with the puppy. Okay, what's the indicator of the happiness here? Is that because of the puppy or is that because of anything else? Smiles. Thank you. Smiles, right? Now, the smile is this side. It's observable. It's 100%. Although, actually, what constitutes as a smile can be very, very different across culture, but that's a different topic. But it's observable, right? That I can't smile. I suck at the smiling, seriously. But that's the observable side. And we're actually making assumption that that's related to happiness. Guess what? A lot of people actually smile when they're not happy. They do. They do. Sad. Adulting sucks. But anyway, So that's happiness is over here, smile is over here, observable area. That's different, right? It's a subtle difference, but it's important to recognize the difference. The same thing with the flow. Flow we can't see, but for example, altered sense of time. Later on in the chapter, we're gonna see how people actually spend half an hour, but they feel like they spend 5 minutes. That altered sense, we can actually measure them. We can actually observe it. But we're linking and we're assuming that's caused by flow. Guess what? Ultimately, we do not know. The final key concept is called operational definition, which is a definition of a construct like happiness, flow. What's important is this word, measurement. It's specifically linked to the way we measure in a given study. In this study A. So actually, the way flow is operationally defined may different from one study to another. And that's a problem sometimes. It's like, hey, we can't compare the results directly because of that. But that's important to leisure studies. Why? Because there's literally no universal definition of leisure. And probably there shouldn't be. There shouldn't be probably. That's the beauty of leisure too. But in each study, especially social psychological study of leisure, there should be operational definition. Okay, operational definition is a working definition in this study. Without that, how can you go about measuring? How can you go about actually doing a scientific study about it? So there should be, you should see some clear definition in that particular study. They're not the same thing. We don't have this, we should have this. We don't have this, we should have this. Okay? Wanted to do this, but we don't have a time. Sorry about that, I talked a lot. I got too excited because I didn't do anything on a Monday. I was just sleeping on a bed. So you'll have a good day. I will see you Friday. We get to work on this. I did record. Bye, take care. Do the thing. The balance, important. Yes.